So you put people back on their feet, you give them tools, and you help them to leave the streets.
I was speaking to Jim Lewis. You know who he is?
Long Beach Rescue Mission.
Long Beach. And his answer to that question, his suggestion, I like yours very much.
Mm-hmm.
His was that if each Christian family would take in another family. It's basically the same idea, it's just a little bigger. You know,
So
but
there's
it's
a
the same
lot of
idea.
Christian families struggling through this economy
Okay,
downturn too.
okay.
But,
I know.
I accept his premise that sure, let's do that.
You have a 3-bedroom house.
Mm-hmm.
You got 2 kids. You put the 2 kids in one bedroom, and you put another person or a family in the other bedroom.
I'm actually going to be up in Long Beach for our Pacific Regional meeting in about a week. So I'll see Jim. I get emails from him every day.
He's an interesting guy.
Yeah.
When I spoke to Andy, when I edited the interview with Andy, he said that what we needed to end homelessness was a change of heart in our society. And I actually asked his assistant twice to ask him that question for me, to get an answer to how do we get a change of heart in our society. Do you have an answer to that question?
Well, that's a commentary that I make a lot here. And I think for the urban people in San Diego that do see homeless, they know it's a very complex problem. It's not just one thing. There's drugs and alcohol. There's huge mental health component. There are some 30% or more of this population that's dually diagnosed, that they have mental health issues and then one or both of the substance abuse issues. So it's not as simplistic as it looks. And then you've got people that are out there on the dole that are just, it's Southern California. It's not Chicago. It can be cold and wet sometimes, but it ain't like living in Chicago.
It's not 20 below and 40-mile-an-hour wind.
It's not so terrible bad. And there's a lot of parklands in San Diego where you can get kind of lost. They run through the core of the city. And a lot of people, that live up in the shrubbery, like I used to live up in Solana Beach, there's 1 or 2 resident homeless people here and there. They're mostly in canyons. You don't see them a lot. And if you drive fast enough and get lucky at the lights, you don't have to stop at a freeway on-ramp. You just glide by them. They're not part of your life. And we were shooting a commercial for our Sleepless event this past weekend, and we went down to an inner city area that used to be the Skid Row area. They kind of have cleaned up when they built the ballpark, and they moved a lot of those people into different areas, even closer to some of the residential areas. But still a lot of the service providers are down in this kind of not so great area of East San Diego.
When I was coming here, driving past Balboa Park, there's all kinds of people running and walking and whatever. Middle class people, and there's a homeless guy right there.
Oh yeah, they're interspersed all over. And I think people have different opinions about why they're there. So
a lot of people think they don't want to do anything about their
they're
life.
lazy, and the first thing they'll make a comment is, look, they're smoking $6 pack of cigarettes. Reality is that's about all they got of those stupid cigarettes. So one of the things our program here that we did for Sleepless is we made this poster.
It's okay. You can
It's a 5 things that you do, and it's actually done by a Christian organization that does these things. And it's a video. And we hire these guys to produce this thing for us. The 5 things you might help out a homeless. And one of them in here, not the first one, is don't give them your money. Because it's likely not to go where you think it's going to go.
They're going to buy drugs or alcohol with it.
Well, it depends on what time of day it is and what their need cycle tells them.
Could I have that?
Yeah.
I'll scan it and put it adjacent to this.
So it's we played this video as part of our homeless ads, and we also played it this past weekend when we had our event. And when, as a homeless provider, I tell people don't give those folks money, they look at me as, why not? Well, you can give them socks, you can give them a granola bar, you can give them a bottle of water, you can give them toilet paper, you can give them a lot of things. And that way, what you're giving them is what you're giving them. But when you give them that money, you don't know what it's going to be exchanged for. And the other thing you can give them is I always keep in my car booklets for McDonald's or Burger King. They're $1 a piece. And, you know, depending on the person's need, you might give them 1 or 2 of those. You know, they're halfway there to getting a hamburger or something. And not that they can't resell those things to get what they want, booze or alcohol or whatever it is, but it's an intermediary step that, you know, maybe they'll actually go buy something, or you could go buy a sandwich and give it to them. I think the issue of the homeless is the matter of people's perception. And they think that the average homeless person is 50 years old, guy, scraggly beard. But the reality is the average age of a homeless person is like 9 years old. If you take that population and divide it. Last year in San Diego County, in our own school system here in San Diego County, 3% of that population, or 13,000 children last year, had at least one episode of homelessness. People don't know that. This is a military town. It's the biggest military installation in the United States, maybe the world, San Diego. 20% of the homeless population here are veterans. And they used to be exclusively Vietnam veterans that have been banging around for 20 years trying to find themselves. But now we're seeing 28 and 29-year-old kids with 3 tours in the Persian Gulf on the streets. Nobody knows that. The homeless population in San Diego, 19% of that population has at least one job, and most of them have 2 or 3, and they still don't have enough money to pay first and last or get into a decent housing. But most of the population doesn't see that. They see a guy with a 16-ounce can of beer at 3 o'clock in the afternoon and a $6 pack of cigarettes in his pocket.
And he got all that money panhandling. That's what they say.
Yeah. If you go down to our emergency shelter down here every night, where we take in, the city thinks 60 to 80, but some nights it's as many as 120 people. We'll put them in the hallways. Our philosophy is never to turn a mother and child away after dark. And I go down, and I think I said to you before that whatever the number is, if it's 100, 50 of them are kids. And I'm going to tell you, I have 12 grandchildren, and I know where each one of them is sleeping tonight. And I pass through that courtyard every night when I leave here at 7 o'clock. And I see kids down there, the temperature's dropping, and they got a t-shirt, and they got a diaper on that should have been changed 2 hours ago. And the mothers are here, and they've walked away from, or the police have driven them away from a bad situation at home, and they don't know what to do with them. 40% of the people down there are domestic violence. But that's the numbers that nobody sees.
What I wonder, what you just said when you referred to your own grandchildren, is a significant percentage of those children have grandparents who have a place to live. But they're not taking action.
Yeah, and they may not be here. And you know, nobody writes home and tells their parents they're homeless. They'll hide that as long as they possibly can. But when I go down there and I think of, and I've got grandchildren, and my kids are still producing babies, so they got young kids. And when I see those young babies down there with diapers on, happy as a clam, we got riding toys and balls down there to try and keep them occupied. They have no idea where they slept last night, have no idea where they're going to be sleeping tomorrow. That's how I know that God put me in this job. He put me here for a reason. And that's my paycheck many nights when I go home, is just that little push to say, yeah, your San Diego Rescue Mission's doing some pretty good work here, and you're a part of it.
Well, I appreciate you. Thank you.
It's not me. I got a great staff here. There isn't a person who works in this building that's here for a paycheck. Doesn't mean they can't live without it. But there isn't a single person on the staff here that is here.
Well, you need your paycheck too. It's part of the human condition.
You know, the story I told you about giving up the 2 jobs, or turning away from those 2 jobs, God had a hand in that too. So I told my wife, you know, we came out here for, you know, a 7-figure job to live pretty good and to kind of be away from the misery that we'd been part of on the East Coast with previous marriages. And in one swoop of intelligence, I go and pick a job that's going to take me back to my 1984 earning capabilities. But it wasn't important at the time, and it's not important now. This is the best job I've ever had in my life. It's probably the toughest job I've had in my life, too.
If there were one moment when you decided that service was going to be a major part of your life, can you remember when that was and describe it for us, please?
I think that was when I was at Katrina.
While you were in Mississippi?
Yeah, I was just overwhelmed with the amount of devastation. In Mississippi, I know New Orleans got flooded out, and it was a compacted area with a lot of misery. But in Mississippi, it was 62 miles long and 20 miles, deep. But those houses down there, quite frankly, many of them in the urban areas weren't very great houses before the flood came. So little shotgun houses, and usually a husband and wife with two cars. One car that would make it around Gulfport and Biloxi, and the other one that might make it over to Jackson if you gave it a $50 tune-up before it went. Most of the population down there works for the casinos or for the hospitality industry, the hotels or restaurants. There's not electronics, there's not a lot of factories down there. And so when this tidal wave came in, it destroyed the hotels. Everything along that coastal area, I think it's, I've forgotten, one is 10 and one's 15, but anyway, all of that coastal stuff is destroyed. The casinos, those barges that are 300 and 400 yards long were just pushed up on shore and destroyed. They ended up cutting them up for scrap. They couldn't do anything with them. So in one afternoon storm, people lost their cars, their houses, their personal effects, their jobs, their source of income. They had nothing. And that just overwhelmed me.
And it wasn't one of them, it's times many thousands.
It's a lot of people that just, I think that probably 20% of that population moved out of Mississippi to go bunk in with people and never went back, because they knew they could never, ever get ahead again. They could never catch up again.
Well, they could never do as well as they were doing in Springfield or Houston or wherever they went to.
Mm-hmm. But they were living in Mississippi good in the good old days. They had two little broken down cars. They ate every day. They made pretty good tips, but it was just above borderline poverty but because their houses were kind of flea traps and they weren't real great and they didn't have air conditioning, but this was the life they were used to. They had great suit and went to church on Sunday looking and feeling pretty good. But if you compared them to other populations in urban areas like Boston or Phoenix or Dallas or anything else, people say, "Woo, why would I want to live like this?" And then when it all went away, I arrived there a week later looking at these populations that just absolutely have no place to go. They have no food, they have no water, they have no electricity, they have no resources.
They have no parents, they have no way to get, they have no way to get there if they did have parents.
No. And no stuff. All this stuff is gone or wet or destroyed. And that was a fairly humbling situation. I think that's kind of what set me up to take this position here.
Besides church attendance, do you have any particular spiritual practice that you could share with us?
Yeah, I my wife and I are both early risers, and I will just, in the interest of being truthful, tell you that she's up before me most every morning.
Okay.
And that could be anywhere from 4 to 4:15 in the morning.
Wow.
And when I was on this regimen of trying to lose some weight, I lost a lot of weight a couple of years ago, and so 2 or 3 mornings a week I go to the Y, and I'm standing there with my little card at 4:30 waiting for them to open the door up so I can get a workout in. But the very next thing that happens when I go home is what she does when she first gets up, and that is that we generally take the first hour of the day and do our spiritual devotions. And a lot of days I don't have an hour to put into it. But
describe those to us, please.
Yeah, I have a regimen. I read have 3 or 4 books. I have a book of men's readings. I use Oswald Chambers. I use 3 or 4 other structured Bible readings that come from, believe it or not, one comes from a hot rod association. Christian Rodders sends me a calendar every month of readings, and the Presbyterian Church has a series of readings. So I just kind of cobble all of that together. It's not very organized. My wife, however, is much more methodical. She'll work on either a section of the Bible, and she'll work her way through that. She's pretty good at that. And I don't have that kind of time to put into it, so I use my own method of filling up that time in the morning, which is usually someplace between 20 and 30 minutes. Some days, if I feel I've got enough space, then I'll pull my Bible out and start backing into, okay, not just to read a scriptural section of a book, but to go and find out what was going on at that time in the Bible, what the historical setting is, and what else is going on in that book. I generally am not. I don't have an hour or so I have to be pretty dedicated and pretty regimented on how I do those readings in the morning.
Is there a spiritual practice that's not Bible-centric that you could recommend?
I really believe that the spiritual practice that's even more powerful than reading the Bible on a regular basis is praying and learning how to pray. Sometimes people pray over their meals. We have, since my wife and I are 3,000